Hey there, welcome back to Farmcraft. I'm John, and this is Large Marge. If you haven't seen Large Marge before, I've got a whole series of videos on fixing her up. I got her for scrap price a while back, and I've had to do an awful lot of work to get her to this point, but we are getting close. We are definitely well beyond the halfway point. And in this video, I want to address the final oil leak that I really know about on the machine, and that is the engine oil. I fixed the engine oil cooler previously, but discovered that it is actually leaking around the oil pan, which is a kind of a two-part thing. I'm kind of curious to get it open and see what's going on in there, why they made it two parts. I'll go ahead and jinx myself. I think as far as changing an oil pan gasket, this is going to be an easy one. Many of you who have been watching my channel for a while know just how ridiculous it is for me to say that, because it's never easy. But anyway, let's get into it. All right, so here we are. There's the bottom of our engine, and you can see this right here is all oily, and if you look up on top, it's definitely leaking in that gasket around there. And that's what I mean by a two-part. I don't know why that's a separate piece, but you know, easy enough to unbolt that and take that off. But then there's the actual oil pan, which is also leaking. You can see up there, it looks like somebody put a bunch of RTV on it. Looks like it might be leaking around that bolt. I did re-torque these bolts a while back, and that did not help. Looks like that bolt's leaking a little bit there too. So yeah, I mean, there's a significant leak here. Oil's collecting on the bottom of it, and actually leaking out of that enough that it's even getting on. This is the fuel filter. This doesn't have oil in it, but you can see the engine oil on it. So this has to be fixed. Now, I have not changed the oil in this thing yet, even though I've had it for months. That's because the first thing I did, or one of the first things I did, was test the oil in both the engine and the hydraulic system, and they both tested good. So I've left this oil in here while I was fixing other things. Now at this point, I'm going to be pulling the pan, so we're going to be changing the oil. So I'm going to start it up, get the engine good and hot, and then we're going to drain this oil out. Alright, well, I have good news and bad news. I'm definitely leaking around this, so that's got to come off, but that's easy. I really would rather not take the entire pan off if I don't have to, and I don't think it's actually leaking from the gasket seal. A couple of the bolts might be leaking, but I could take the bolt out and put RTV right around it and probably seal that up. Because you can see in the front here, this pan, you know, it bolts onto the bell housing. So kind of complicated to get it sealed up. One of those ones that's just not a simple gasket, bolt it up, torque it down, you're done. So if it's not actually leaking, I don't want to take that off. What I did find though, see that? This thing is leaking from that gasket. This is the supply pump. It's a low pressure pump that draws fuel into the injection pump. It's definitely engine oil. And it's actively leaking even when I'm sitting here. I've been sitting for a while without the engine running. So it's a significant leak. If I recall, when Area Diesel rebuilt this, this part was not available and was broken. So they had to take it into the machine shop and like weld onto it.
You can see during the disassembly process, the ear busted right off. So it just fell apart. We're assuming it was cracked from the get. This is now junk, thus the reason we didn't finish cleaning it up.
So it's possible that I have a pinhole or something there that it's leaking through. So I'm going to need to take that off. First try. Actually, don't know if I showed it on camera, but I did try tightening these bolts. There's only 3 of them, and I didn't want to go cranking on them too hard and end up breaking something. Why was that leaking? Gasket looks okay. Look at that. Paint even got up into it. I don't think that's flat anymore. That's the problem. They welded this back up with a TIG welder, and then you can see they kind of hit it with a flap wheel or something, and it feels pretty good. But there is there's a little bit of a divot right there. Let me see if I can show that to you. If I take this straight edge on there, if I keep this straight edge flat on there, you can see light shining underneath it. And it's not much, it's pretty flat right there. But just right there, there's a gap. The gasket is a nice rubbery gasket. It's still in good shape, but it's quite thin. So it's not going to take up much of that gap. And obviously that allowed the oil to get out. That's a 9/1000 feeler gauge that goes in there. It's just not that big. But it's enough. It's enough to let it leak. But I think RTV will fix it. I'm going to make a mess of some RTV here, but we'll clean it up in a little bit. This stuff isn't that old, but the end clogged up and I had to cut the end off, so I can't really control the bead much. And I cleaned that off with brake cleaner. I've got those just barely snug. I'm going to set a timer, and it's, you get between 40 and 60 minutes depending on where you read. I'll give it 50 minutes and then I'll come back and we'll tighten them down. We're at 50 minutes. All right, so those are torqued down. And I'm not going to run it until tomorrow. Probably late tomorrow. I want this to hold, and giving it plenty of time to cure is the way to go here. So you might be wondering, am I upset at Area Diesel that thing is leaking? And the answer is not at all. They did a custom repair that a lot of shops would not have done, and they would have told me this thing's scrap, we can't get the part, blah, blah, blah. And I really would have thought that a gasket could handle 9/1000 in variance. I don't blame them at all, and when you do custom type repair work, you're going to have some trial and error, and that's an example of what this is. This is easily fixed, no big deal. So while that RTV is setting up, I'm going to turn my attention to something else that a lot of people have been asking for me to do, and that is the window glass. Yeah, and people keep asking, like, why haven't you changed that yet? I mean, it actually is still keeping a lot of the rain out like it is, even though there's a hole in it. And obviously the front panel is pretty much intact. So I didn't want to take it out until I had new glass to replace it with. And I didn't want to start out replacing glass when the heart of the machine isn't fixed yet. You know, I want to make sure the machine's going to be viable before I'm messing around with that. It's kind of like, you know, you've got a scrap machine and you're going to return it to service and the first thing you do is paint the counterweight. Nope. So, I am finally ready. I've got some replacement glass, actually Lexan, so plastic. And we're going to get this out of here, making as little mess as possible. But it's also not that simple of a repair. This piece here I had cut to those dimensions, so hopefully it'll fit okay. But fitting around this doorknob or latch or whatever you want to call that, you can see that this piece of glass was cut around the latch to accommodate it. So I'm going to have to figure all that out. And the other thing is the front glass, you know, those handles up there, you pull and you should be able to tilt it up, but the tracks that it runs on are broken. So that's another thing I'm going to need to fix while I'm working on this. First step, let's get this old glass out of here. I did look at taking this door off, but it has fasteners that you have to get to both sides at the same time. And once I put the new glass in, that would be very difficult. The other thing is to knock out the roll pins that look very rusted and difficult to replace. So I opted to just keep it where it was. Don't open that can of worms. All right, that one's out. This one I'm going to see if I can just take the whole thing out of the frame. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know about this. This mechanism is broken and I can't put the window up and leave it. It would actually fall out. So we'll look more at that later. So again, it seems like it's going to be easier just to work with it like it is. And I'm trying not to make a huge mess. Cleaning up glass is pretty annoying, so, but we're going to have to do something here. So this is laminated glass. There's a layer of plastic in between the two glass sheets, and I'm surprised how flexible it is. It's almost rubbery. So, actually that's probably a good thing. So that mechanism certainly leaves something to be desired. This is rusted out there and there, so I need to patch that, weld it. I think I have to take that apart. I'm never going to get that thing to work right otherwise. These things are supposed to help support the weight. These wheels are spring-loaded and pull on these cables to help support the door. But they really don't pull much at all. So, I don't know, maybe I could figure out a way to tighten them up somehow. But I'm not that worried about that. The thing isn't that heavy. I can pick it up, but I just want it to work smoothly. So let me start out taking these wheels off. Yeah, see, it's just a bearing and it spins just fine. So does that one. But that'll let me get this frame out of here, and then I can work on cleaning everything up. Why would you do that? They put a stud on the wheel so that you can't get it out. Why not make that a bolt so that it'll come apart? Sorry about the lighting on this side. I took this one off and I just kind of bent the frame so the wheel would come off. And then did the same thing to this side. Great design. This may not be stock, to be fair. This looks like a rig. The way this thing works, this roller's in here going up and down that track, and when the door goes all the way up, it goes into this area here and sits there, and that supports that, and then there is a hole on the other side that the latch plugs into so that it can't come back, but it needs something to support it on this side, just the weight of it sitting there. That little area has rusted out on this side. This whole section that supports the wheel has rusted out and it's absolutely gone. So I need to replace that with something so this door will work right. The other thing I need to do over here, and this isn't as crucial, but I don't know how that happened, but that got ripped out somehow. I'll pound that back to flat and then just weld something over it. The wheel actually won't go through that, so it won't actually fall out, but it's just kind of stupid. I might as well fix it while I'm here. So this is the left-hand handle. Feels like that could be lubricated, but the bearing is pretty crunchy. Let's see if I can get this seal out of here. It's not horrible, it's just kind of stiff. And of course this thing is not critical, it just needs to spin, so I think I can clean this up and get it working reasonable. Put out with some brake cleaner. Yeah, it loosened right up. That's more like it. It's just some lithium grease. I don't need to go crazy with it, but a little bit in there is going to help, I think. So not perfect, but good enough for who it's for. Well, that is much better. Now this one was catching even when I had the handle pulled. So that thing still sits proud of the bearing, and I don't see the point of that because it was hooking on it. So I'm just going to shorten that down a little bit on the belt grinder. And while I'm here, I might as well grease that pivot too. Interesting, that doesn't want to come out of there. So there's actually 2 bushings on this, and the movement is supposed to be between the bushing and the bolt. So these weren't supposed to come out, but there's a burr on the edge of that, I guess from all the use over the years. So I'm going to go over to the bench grinder, take that burr off, and then get these bushings off of here. Be right back. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, all that junk needs to come off of there. Much better. I'm just going to press these bushings back in. So we've got this piece of metal, it's the same thickness as what's there. It isn't exactly flat, is it? The goat's laughing at me. Yeah, it'd be nice if I could bend that a little bit. See how that does. Yeah, that's a lot better. Yeah, it'll work with a grinder. That'll work just fine. All right, now we need to get this one. Just sitting here welding. Just a welding. All right, now come on. All the way down here, I am welding all the way up there. I mean, that's 11 feet up. How did I start a fire from there to here? I don't know, but it's all right. I was ready. So Dozer was lonely. He's got a bone right there, so he's pretty happy right now. But our older dogs, he just couldn't play with them. He kept knocking them down and hurting them. So we got him a look-alike friend. This is Benning, who the previous owner named after the place they got married, which was at Fort Benning. And she is also an Anatolian Shepherd. And we're calling her Benny for short. We've had her, gosh, it hasn't even been a week yet. And she's starting to fit in pretty well, but it's always a challenge, especially getting a full-grown dog and incorporating her into your household. Now, she's going to be outside only, which means Dozer is going to be primarily outside from now on, too. But she's a good dog. She's just under 2 years old, and she's enjoying her bone as well. Hey, Benning. Hey, girl. You like that bone? She says, yeah, please don't take it from me. And Dozer is very happy to have someone to romp with. Oh! Better watch it, Dozer. She's gonna kick your butt. So Dozer here has just come outside, and I don't think he sees Benning right there sitting under the bush. Oh, he's got to. Derp. This area here was really rusty. It's all looking better. All right, so I've got everything installed. The RTV's had plenty of time to cure, and now I need to prime it. Hopefully that's gonna do it. Be nice if I didn't have to prime it all the way to the injectors or bleed it all the way to the injectors. I'm gonna leave you set up here. This is where we were leaking right there. And then I'm also gonna put a camera underneath, and we'll hopefully start this thing. That looks good. Gotta love it. RTV. Now, I'm going to make sure I have the oil pan gasket all cleaned up. Down there, I'm sure is leaking. But I want to make sure I'm not leaking any up here. So I'm going to get some brake cleaner. We'll clean that all up. And then I'm going to run this thing, get the oil hot, and assuming I don't see any other problems, we will then drain it out. While I'm here, I decided to check the hydraulic oil cooler. Does that look a little wet? Yep, that's oil. You have got to be kidding me. Well, good news on the oil pan, it looks fine. Bad news on the oil cooler seal. It's leaking. Definitely coming from around the seal. That's a real kick in the pants. I thought I was done with that. I'm gonna deal with that later. I wanna get the engine done. That means draining the oil and then taking this guy off and seeing what I can do about regasketing that. Grief. Why? Yeah. So there's a crack in the gasket right there, and a bigger one right there. Looks like another one there. So that's the problem, just the gasket, which is pretty rubbery. But yeah, that gasket's done. It looks like they used RTV and a gasket here, because this is definitely, you know, that's cut rubber. That's not RTV there. But this in here is. Yeah, somebody tried to use both. Yeah, look at that. Copper washer that's been very smashed, but also is all jacked up there. Probably gonna need a new one of those. So the gasket kit that I got from Area Diesel for this Deutz engine has this copper washer in it, which turns out to be just the right size. In fact, I think this is probably not the right one. It's too wide, and you can see it's like sticking out. So yeah, I think I'm good there. Now for this, my first thought was to use some Buna N rubber, and I have some, but I don't have a piece that's that big. But I got this. This is a cork impregnated with rubber. It's made for sealing oil, coolant, or gasoline, and it is big enough. It's not going to be holding much pressure. It's just the weight of the oil. And if it ever were to leak again, this just isn't that big of a deal to fix it again. I can see that this thing is not a factory gasket the way it was. I'm gonna cut this down a little bit, get rid of some of the excess, and then cut out a new one and put this thing back together, I hope. Alright, new gasket. You know, when I saw this stuff in the package, I saw cork and I wasn't terribly impressed. But there's a lot of rubber impregnated in here. This is a very tough rubbery gasket. Yeah, I think this is a perfect use for it. And if anyone's wondering, it's out of this Felpro gasket set. This is the 1/16 inch thick cork rubber sheet for oil, coolant, and gasoline. I got this all cleaned out and it looks really good. There was no sludge, no metal or anything in there. Just want to make sure this gasket, the holes are going to line up okay. Yep, it goes right on there. Has a little bit of play in all directions. So I think that's going to work. So it was kind of cool to be able to get a good look up in the crankcase without taking the entire oil pan off. Here you can see two of the crankshaft bearings and one of the caps. The thing in your face is the oil pickup tube, and over here is the dipstick, and then up along the side here is the camshaft. The only thing that I don't like that I'm seeing is it looks like there's a crack right there and right there. You can see that, and another one there. So I'm going to make sure I don't over torque these bolts. If that's cracked, it's probably fixable, but not something I want to get into if I can avoid it. Well, I think that one just stripped. I'm going to go ahead and torque them all and just make sure they're going to torque. I'm making sure none of the others are going to strip out before I take it back off. But the rest torque down fine. Alright, now I can see what's wrong with this one. So kind of good news. This is the bolt that stripped out. The threads were messed up and it measures 283. I noticed the threads were messed up when I was cleaning up all the bolts before putting it back together, and I chased the threads, which did cut a little bit off because they were, they were buggered up. But now they are smaller. One of the ones that has good threads on it is measuring 310. So that's like 30 plus thousandths that this is more narrow, and I can even feel it. Yeah, so this bolt's no good. And I think if I get the right bolt, I think it'll do fine. The problem is I don't have one of these. This is a obviously certain length, M8 by 1.25. It's a medium strength bolt. What I do have though is this. This is actually the old starter bolt off of that boat with the 454 engine. And I think this will work just fine. It's grade 8.8, and I just need to turn this down to 8 millimeters basically, get the length right, and then I can thread it M8 1 1/4, and I'll have a medium strength bolt of the right length. I'm actually going to make it just a touch longer because there are threads there to do that, and I'd rather get the maximum thread engagement that I can. So let's throw this thing on the lathe and knock out a bolt real quick. Tap Magic. And this is an M8 by 1 1/4 die. So that presses it flat against there. Now all I need is a wrench to hold it in place. So now what I'm doing, I'm turning this by hand. That's holding the die in place, and then I'm also, with this hand, I'm advancing the tailstock to keep pressure on it and keep that die square. Now that I got it started, I don't have to worry about the tailstock anymore. That's measuring 308, just like the other undamaged one did. So I think this is going to do the trick. So one nice thing is these holes don't communicate with the inside of the oil case. So I'm going to chase the threads in these as well. And I don't have to worry about chips and stuff getting into my engine. Also, if I were to develop a leak around one of these bolts, I think if I remove the bolt, put RTV on the threads, and put the bolt back in, that'll probably seal it up. Now let's see if this will torque. Yes. Okay, it's back on. It's a new copper washer. Shouldn't have to crank it down that tight. I can always tighten it more if I need to, but I think that'll do it. Let's get some oil back in this thing before some bonehead tries to start it. So the manual says if you don't change the filter, it's 4.5 gallons. So that's what I'm going to put in, and then I'm going to check and see if my dipstick is accurate. Yep, it's just a touch on the high side, and I do think I put in a little bit too much, so that's perfect. All right, oil's been in there for a while. Yeah, I guess I need to clean it up again. There's still some black oil, but that's not the fresh oil that I put in. That's just what was there. So I'll get out the brake cleaner, we'll clean that up. And you know, this oil never really gets under pressure. This just needs to hold against gravity, so I can test this just by letting it sit here and seeing if it leaks. So it has been almost 24 hours. And this side looks okay. But on this side I see no leaky. Yeah, I think that's fixed. All right, paint is dry, and we're ready to put this thing back in. I am going to go ahead and put it back in without the glass in place because I'm going to have to do some bending with those wheels, and I also want to make sure that it functions right just in case I need to take it apart again. Nice. working well. Okay, so now I need to get these cables tightened up a little bit and get them connected. So here's our cable, comes over here to a pulley and then down. I've got the door up right now, so the wheel, you probably can't see, the wheel is right there. So that needs to hook onto the wheel on this side. It shouldn't be too hard. It is possible to tighten these things, of course. It's pretty simple actually. So if you pull it all the way out, you can then spin the wheel another turn and run the cable to the other side. So there, I've got another turn on that spring. So I'm going to do that a couple times. Yeah, it's definitely getting harder to turn. Oh yeah, it's quite a bit harder than it was. And this thing isn't that heavy, so yeah, I think I'm gonna go with that. Kind of hard to film this, but I am just hooking the end of this cable onto the wheel so that it can help support the door. And now I'm just tightening up the spring on the other side, and then I'll hook that one up as well. I've got a vice grip clipped on the cable right there, so it's not trying to retract. Nice. All right, I guess I'm gonna put the glass in just like it is. The glass that I got is not glass, it is Lexan, polycarbonate. Same stuff safety glasses are made out of. And this stuff is old and hard. I'm hoping that I'm gonna be able to get this in here without too much of a fight. And I'm probably doing this wrong. Don't take this as a how-to video. This is probably more a how-not video. I removed some of the protective plastic to help it fit into the gasket, but this was not easy. So that was quite a pain, but I got it in the end. Two things. I probably should have ordered these this new rubber gasket sealers because that stuff's old and hard and not very flexible. That made it more difficult. And right at the end, after after fighting with it for way too long, I realized that the rubber thing actually comes apart in two pieces so that you can put it in from one side and then lock it in from the other. I was trying to kind of wedge it all in there at once. Get new sealer, and that won't be bad at all. Okay, so the door doesn't have those sealers. The door actually was just sealed with silicone against the face there and has these one down and one up that will sort of hold it in place. And I'm going to do that. I want to see if I need to do any cutting around the door latch before I go doing any silicone. Yeah, that's going to work. I'm not going to have to cut out for that as long as I don't put too much silicone behind it. Just limit the silicone. First step is to take the film off the inside so the silicone can stick. Okay, that's gonna stay like that tonight. I'll take those clamps off tomorrow, and then I'll probably run silicone around the inside too. But while that's setting up, I have another quick job to do that has been highly requested. So let's get to that. Yeah, this seat's actually quite comfortable and will last. I'll probably never have to replace it, quite honestly. Just having a seat cover on it to protect it a little bit and make it look a little better, I think is the way to go. Didn't feel like spending hundreds of dollars and hours of work to put in a new seat when this one works just fine. There we go. And I'll tell you, this is the first time I've been able to raise that thing. It was just so boiling hot in here, even with the door open, with this front closed. And in this hot weather, it's nice to just be able to pop that thing up and out of the way. So tomorrow, I want to get the clamps off that, pull the plastic off both of the windows, start her up, make sure we're not doing any more leaking from the oil pan. Yeah, we're really getting there. Look at that. It's a bit of an improvement. So that worked really well, but just to make sure that thing stays put, I'm going to go ahead and put a nice thick bead underneath, filling up that gap, and then also coming out onto the glass a little bit so that it's not able to come back this way, you know, for years, and vibration and everything, door opening and closing, getting slammed. Just want to make sure it stays put. Not the neatest job ever, but certainly good enough for this old pig. And that's gonna hold that piece of Lexan in there just fine. How about that? I already have a scratch on it. Oh well. Yeah, I'd say that's a big improvement. I do have a little scratch on it, probably what I had it leaning up against while I was waiting to put it in. So speaking of that, you know, Lexan, we all know safety glasses get scratched up and have to be replaced. Somebody in a comment talked about putting something called rock guard on it. And I looked on the internet, I could not find anything called rock guard. I definitely would like to put some kind of protection on this that's easily replaceable so that this thing doesn't get so scratched up I can't see through it anymore. If there's something out there that you guys know about, would definitely appreciate you putting it in the comments. All right, I've run it a few times and the gasket up top looks great, but I do have a wet bolt. So what's going on there is that's one that has a crack. The crack is going from the oil reservoir through the crack to the threads of the bolt, running down the bolt and out. I could put RTV on the threads. That might work, but given it's full of oil right now, I'm not going to get any good adhesion. And I don't think that's the best answer, actually. What I am going to try and do is see if I have the right size copper washer to put on there, and if not, I'll make one out of rubber or a gasket or something and just gasket that bolt. But I'd rather have a copper washer so I can still torque it down right. All right, let's get this off of here. Oh yeah, look at that. So this is a previously used washer. So I'm going to anneal it so that it'll crush better. That's all you got to do. Yeah, it's a nice smooth surface. That should work. And obviously if I see any oil show up on any of the other bolts, I'll do the same thing. And that should do it. All right, I have to admit, that really does look a lot better. She's starting to look like a machine instead of an old piece of junk. So after running and after sitting, no oil on that bolt. So the copper washer is working. I am going to torque it again, just in case that copper washer crushed down a little bit and the amount of torque on the bolt reduced. But we're good here. No leaky. So there you go, guys. More project on Large Marge, and there's still more to do. So I'm happy with the way things are going with it. Now, a bunch of you requested that I paint it. Would you guys really want to watch me paint it? I know we've been through this. I hate painting. But I'm not totally opposed to painting this thing, but I just can't imagine people wanting to watch that. That's not something that I personally would want to watch. If you really would want to watch me paint this, leave a comment, leave a like. Let me see. Let me see how many comments and likes we get on this video, and I'll see if I want to make a video of doing that. That's a big machine. That's going to be a lot of work. Boy, it'd be nice if I had a boom lift. Oh yeah. All right. I'm kind of wrapping my head around this. The next big thing that I need to work on is the high-speed drive. It does not work right now. I'm hoping it's an electrical problem, but I haven't even started to look at it yet. There's a couple other things. There's the temperature sensor doesn't work, the hour meter doesn't work, and I need to get all those things sorted out. So there's definitely more on the way. I do have some other jobs that I'm going to be getting into, so I'm not sure exactly what order the videos will be coming out in, but definitely more content on the way. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.